going to move on to hear from Raina, which is very exciting, into the folklore of the old mill at Killin. So we've had Barry Mill and the stories there, and we've got the healing stones of St. Fillan, so it's a whole new realm to explore. So over to you, Raina.
Hi there, everyone. So yes, I'm talking about the folklore of the old mill in Killin and the healing stones of St. Fillan today. So, and the reason it's both is there's folklore associated with both of them. So starting with the old mill, you can see it. I just wonder if I can get rid of these. There you go. So that's the old mill in the sunshine, looking rather lovely. And it's associated with the with St. Fillan. So in early Christian times, the cult of St. Fillan was prevalent in the local area and is reflected in many of the place names around the area too, including the mill. It has many names. It's called we call it the Old Mill, but it's also referred to as the Dochart Mill, being on the River Dochart, and St. Fillan's Mill as well. And local sort of folklore has it that St. Fillan built the first mill on the site. And it said that there's been a succession of mills on the site. I'm yet to find any actual hard evidence of this, but I am still looking. It's interesting nonetheless that that is said. Some of the traditions surrounding the mill related to St. Fillan is that no work is done in the mill on the 20th of January. Or some people say the 19th, because actually the Catholic feast of St. Fillan is actually on the 19th of January. But for some reason, the 20th of January is the actual day that generally no work is done in the mill, which is associated with St. Fillan's Day, which is interesting that it's a slightly different day. Quite a lot of the traditions, when they sort of migrated from the old calendar to the new calendar, it became a bit sort of murky which day exactly they were supposed to be held on. There was also St. Fillan's ash tree and seat that were next to the mill. One old story is that somebody cut down a branch of St. Fillan's ash tree to fix the lintel on their house, and their house burnt to the ground shortly afterwards. And this was considered to be right and proper. Some in the village, they seem to said to have, got what they deserved. So here are the healing stones. John will be speaking after me, and he'll tell you a bit more about these sockets that you can see in two of the stones, which are associated with the workings of an old type of mill. But the healing stones themselves have been sort of revered in the village for a long time, and people come still today from all over the world to be healed by these stones. And if you speak to villagers in the village today, you'll still hear stories of how somebody's warts on their hands got healed by the stones, somebody's husband got cured of cancer. And they're said to work by sympathetic magic. So the idea is that they all look like different parts of the body. So you can quite obviously see which one would be the headstone. And sometimes people think they're with different organs, like the heart and the liver and the lungs. Some people say they're more to do with like areas of the body, so the torso and the limbs. I think it really just, it's more to do with how you feel about them, really. And, that's really how they work in themselves. I mean, if you look through historical records, sometimes there's 7 stones, sometimes 5 stones. Now we have 8 stones. It isn't so much the objects themselves as the association with them, which makes them work. And this goes right back to, how people see them today is very different from how the original early Christians would have seen them. They really believed that, the objects themselves were the saint. And so they actually not just conveyed his power, but actually brought the presence of St. Fillan to the person who was being healed. They were traditionally kept by a matriarchal line in the village, according to Gillies. So there was a woman who had a house in the village, and she was associated with the miller's family. And people would go and knock on her door, and she would never take any money for healing, but people would traditionally offer her gifts. And she would rub the appropriate stone 3 times one way, 3 times back the other, and 3 times the first way, while saying some sort of Gallic incantation, which we've been looking for again, or something that might be similar, but we haven't found anything as yet. But that's be interesting to know what that was. Another ritual that's done associated with the stones is the rebedding of them every Christmas Eve. So we just recently carried this out. You can see the pictures of it on our Facebook page shortly. I'm going to be putting them up soon. What happens is all the people from the village come down with their children on Christmas Eve. We take all the stones out of their bedding, and then we wash them all in river water and take out the old bedding, and then we put new bedding that I will cut a couple of weeks beforehand back into the case, and then we put all the stones back into there, and then we go and throw the bedding into the water of the Dochart again. And this is said to have been carried out for as long as anyone can remember. On the Kist of Riches, I think my Gaelic isn't great, but I think it's Tober and Dulcis. Somebody may be able to correct me on that. Graham Wilson, who's one of the millers in the 60s who used to run the old mill, talks about this tradition. And you can find it in many of the writings about the tradition as well. So the stones today, here this picture was I meet all sorts of interesting people who come to the mill with all sorts of different beliefs. And this picture here is a pastor who does laying of hands, and they all came and occupied the room upstairs and did lots of sort of carried out what they do, and kindly shared the photos with me afterwards. But something that I've never seen before, which is quite interesting. The rebedding. So there's lots of different ideas about exactly how this tradition was carried out. Some people say they washed the stones, some people say they didn't. Some people say you shouldn't cut the stones, you should only the bedding, sorry, you should only pick it. So we follow our own way of doing it. It's quite nice to have to wash them in the river water, so we include that in the ceremony that we do now. And we've tended to have a musician come along. It just sets the scene nicely. We had Celine, a local harpist, come along this time, which was really lovely. And we tend to just do a moment of silence to for everyone to think about healing and what they and peace in the world. Just links Christmas with the stones as well. And we make sure the room's closed, and we pass around the stones, and everyone gets to have a hold of them in the ceremony as well. So we've added our own little twist to it, which I think is something that probably would have, these things, as with the number of stones, change with the meanings that people put on them. We still take no payment in association with the stones. There's always this tension between preserving the tradition of something and the modern pressure to raise money to keep projects going. But I really, I think it would be I really try to resist the monetization of the stones. I think that preserving them for what they are, it's something quite unusual, and I think that's more important than using them directly to raise money. They're visited and used by people of many beliefs, so it's a fine line that I have to tread. Some people come, they're very Christian. I've had Catholic people coming and visiting them, and then we definitely get some people of a more witchy bent who come and believe that they're perhaps something older than the saint, and it's keeping everybody, holding everybody's beliefs and allowing space for all of it, and not trying, not projecting anything ourselves, and letting people associate them with whatever they will. So that's something that we have to hold in balance when we're doing it. And then we get some people as well, some Christians particularly, who don't like the what they represent, that the idol kind of idea as well. So we have to keep that in the balance too. And this Christmas, we decided to celebrate the traditions and build on it. So up in our heritage hub room upstairs, we had the stones in the middle. We 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 created some displays about the sort of traditions and the ideas around St. Fillan and some of the other stories associated with him as well. And we made lots of plaited rag bracelets and rubbed them on the stones and kept them, and then people took them away, and we had a little wish tree, and we allow people to sort of book in to come and hold the stones as well. So we sort of tried to provide some sort of focus for the stones as well, because people really still, they're a real example of how these ideas that people like to put these sort of spiritual values on objects still today, and people still are interested in that kind of thing. So I think I'll go over to John now, and he can say more about the physical aspects of the healing stones and what's interesting there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Raina. That was so interesting. I've made so many notes, but we'll come back for questions. So here are the slides. Over to you, John.
Well, thank you very much. My story begins at the Mills Conference in Perth in 2022 when I met Raina, and she invited me around to have a look at her mill at Killin, so I duly went. When I got there was not very much machinery inside, but I did see this tray of stones, which I now know are the healing stones. And my attention was immediately drawn to stones which are numbered here 2 and 8 because of the holes in the top. It so happens I have in my personal collection a stone bearing from a horizontal water mill from Spain, and the holes look very similar, very familiar to me. Now, how do I go on to the next one?
If you just say next slide when you want it, John.
Okay, right. So some of you may not be familiar with horizontal mills, so I've put this drawing in to clarify what we're talking about. Oh, I can actually point. Good. This is a very nice drawing of a typical Scottish Norse mill. You see the water comes down, works the horizontal water wheel at the bottom. The thing that is wrong about this drawing is that it shows the water dropping neatly into the floor and running away very neatly. In fact, if you've ever seen a horizontal mill working, there's clouds of spray everywhere, and it's more a water feature, and you can hardly see the wheel at all. So looking at a bit more detail, if you go up to the top right, I've shown a diagram of the turl, the rotating part of the horizontal wheel, with the components. There is a piece, in this case of stone, sticking down, which is the pintle, known as a pintle, and at the bottom, the fixed part, fixed to the bridge tree, is the socket. And here is a photograph of a stone bearing, which was actually taken by Bertog Moon in Switzerland, but this is how it would have worked. The pintle would be rotating, and the stone below is fixed into the bridge tree. Next. Okay, so to look at the stones in a little more detail, I've set these out at the same scale. So you'll notice that overall sizes of the stones are slightly different. Mine seems to be a lot smaller, but what interests me are actually the size of the holes. There are basically 2 sizes of holes shown on these, a small one on mine and a small one on the left of stone number 8. And there are 2 which are larger, the right-hand one of stone number 8 and stone number 2. And I think this indicates that in the larger holes there was originally a stone pintle. In the smaller holes it'd been modernized, and there's a iron pintle, and that one with an iron pintle. Now, the features we're looking for I don't know if you can pick them out, but the series of concentric circles or striations which indicate a rotating shaft. And there's also a very small mark in the center, which is a bit inexplicable, which I've described as a pip, but it appears in all of them, even my own example, which I hadn't noticed before I went to Killin. So that seems to indicate, confirm really that these were from horizontal mills. The other feature is that they're worn to one side of the hole. Beside the vertical wheel of the vertical weight of the turl coming down, there's also a force to one side where the water is pushing the water wheel around and pushes it to one side. So that's another indication that these really are horizontal mill bearings. Next. Right, just a few more examples here. I went to the TIMS Symposium in Portugal last September and was fortunate to find several more examples of horizontal mill stones. The one on the top right-hand corner was at a working mill still working nicely near Coimbra. Made very nice flour, which made very nice cakes, which they gave us. But you see here, it's got the typical striations, the circular marks. It's also here is the pintle which went with it, and you can see the worn spherical shape which fitted into the socket, and the raised pip at the top, which fits into that little hole in the middle. On the left side, I've shown some examples from a watermill museum, which have the same features: the socket and the raised dome on the pintle and the little pip on top. And another example from the cultural centre in Valongo, which is near Porto. So, to my mind, there's no question these the stones at Killin were actually from a horizontal watermill. So if I can have the next one. Right. Oh, I forgot to mention at the beginning that Raina had brought in a geologist to examine the stones, made a very professional report, and Fiona indicated, though there was no absolute proof, it was almost likely that the Killin stones were local from the mill area. According to John Shaw, the water power historian, there was vague documentary evidence to a local horizontal mill on the south bank of Loch Tay, about 4 miles east of Killin. And he says it's very likely that there were other horizontal mills in the area, but evidence is lacking. The other point I'd like to make is that there's a good stream running past the present mill, or the present old mill, which would have been ideal for powering horizontal mills. So what I would like to conclude here is that at Killin we have found the first actual evidence of the use of horizontal mills in mainland Scotland. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, John.